Story by several Pokemon, a man, a Miss Birthday, and also a deer. I've had a few times in my life where I get messages from, I guess, the other side is the best way I can put it. As a person who struggles with what I believe at all times to be nothing but something. I'm not saying it doesn't sound strange, but I cannot describe it another way. Information I didn't previously have is suddenly in my mind and has a varying level of insistence that I deliver said message. For example, one of the times I was at an eye appointment and got a message that a man with dark hair and a woman who was sorry she missed the optometrist's birthday said to tell her hello and the birthday thing. I was so embarrassed, telling myself I was nuts and not to bother this learned doctor with Teresa Caputo nonsense, especially when the message was mostly just hi. The level of insistence I felt to say it, I really wish there was a better way I could think to describe this, grew until it felt unbearable, and I abashedly apologized to her before saying, "I'm so sorry if this seems bizarre, but I'm supposed to tell you." So when I told her, she burst into tears and told me that her father and her aunt had just passed away the previous month, and her aunt and she had birthdays in the same week, so they'd always exchange cards and have a birthday together. Not regularly, but a few other times I'd receive messages like this, and each time the person to whom I delivered the message said they'd understood and seemed emotional and stuff, so I don't think, were they lying? The warning felt the same as these messages, but it was only for me. It must have been 16 years ago now. I live in the northeastern USA and was driving 4 to 5 miles back from my boyfriend's house at night in a heavily wooded area on familiar but extremely windy roads, like twisty, not blowing wind. For the record, I was in my early 20s and did not partake of any substances. The warning was that a deer would be in the road when I came around a sharp corner right after a little bridge. I am naturally such a questioner, so I doubted myself like I did the other times, but the message was insistent and so specific. It was like I could see the deer in the road and exactly where. As I said, the whole drive was woodsy back roads, so a deer could have been anywhere, but the spot where I knew it would make very little sense. That bridge is over a big creek, and it's a sharp hill it's on. On one side of the road is no road shoulder, and almost immediately a very steep hill down to the creek. On the other is an extremely steep hill going up, literally almost vertical at the bottom, on top of which sits a big bed and breakfast. For a deer to be where I knew it would have to have come from a substantial distance down the road after jumping over the guardrail that borders those steep hills for some time. Not impossible at all, but just strange and improbable. The closer I got to the spot, the more insistent the message became. And when I got to the sharp corner with the bridge, I slowed my car down going around it, coming to a park. Even though the message was helpful, it made me feel creeped out in a way no messages for others ever did. I rounded the corner, looking calm as anything, to anyone, if they were somehow outside the car. But inside, my heart was pounding and my eyes were wide and scared. The deer was exactly where I knew it would be, just standing there. I didn't see it walk onto the road. I didn't even almost hit it, because I knew just where to stop. So I just sat there, with my bumper a few yards in front of the deer until they decided to walk around and pass my car, still on the road, and around the corner out of sight. I think I started to cry, said thank you to I don't know who, and I drove the rest of the way home, less than a mile at that point. This is on my mind because I just had a similar feeling tonight, but less specific, and I almost didn't say anything because it was with my best friend driving, who is a skeptic and doesn't believe in anything. I knew we were getting close from the insistence of the feeling, less of an actual message this time. So I finally said something, and shortly after, the deer was there, staring at us. I made the mistake of asking him why he thinks I've ever received messages, making it clear that it reminded me of the old story, and not that tonight was necessarily an example, since it was less specific. He just says since there are deer in the area, it's just a coincidence, completely disregarding the level of detail with which I saw the deer in the warning. Does anybody out there have a better explanation than, since deer live in the area, it's literally a 50-50 chance it would have been there? He also pointed out that if the deer hadn't been there, I'd just never have thought about it again. That's not a terrible point, but not true either, because I do remember the one time that I had a bad feeling that didn't seem to come to fruition, and I don't take these things lightly or for granted. But maybe my friend is right, and I'm just nuts, and it's all been coincidences. So I do believe in coincidences, but not in this case. I think there's two categories. There are coincidences and there are forces at play that manipulate the world and influence us, our brains, and gives us information that we couldn't possibly have had otherwise. I think in so many cases, we're being fed this information. I'm moving away from the idea that it's just an innate ability, like a superpower, premonition superpower. I think probably guardian angel involvement, where they're implanting these feelings, sometimes direct visions, into our brains when necessary. The question still remains, though, of why would it be necessary to warn you if quantum immortality exists? Why is it important that you, your soul, remains linked to this specific universe? There has to be more to it. It's almost like a specific mission or quest that can only be completed in this specific universe. Maybe just for your own experience, this is what you want to have happen. And you need to remain here because the other universes nearby, even though changes aren't major, they're probably significant enough that you can't accomplish what you wanted if you move over. So for that reason, they have to protect you. That's interesting. Welcome, I'm Paul, this is Dave. Today I have 9 Glitch in the Matrix and paranormal stories for you. My favorite story involves the most important memory. Like the video if you feel so inclined, and let's get to it. Story by Dr. Electronic, 1934. Arm's reach and gone. So, about 3 years ago, me and my roommate Jake were basically homeless for like 2 weeks. Not in a bad way, just stuck in that annoying gap between apartments where the new place isn't ready yet. We ended up booking an Airbnb to ride it out. Studio apartment, middle of some complex out in San Antonio, Texas. Nothing special, just somewhere to sleep until we could make our move into our real place. The layout was very simple. You walk in the front door and the bed and TV are right there to your left. If you keep walking straight, there's a small doorway that leads into the kitchen, a tiny little thing, barely enough room to move around in. The bathroom is to the right of that. That's the whole apartment. No hallway, no real separation between anything, just one open room and 2 small doors. One thing that always stuck out to me about the place was how exposed it felt. It was dead center of the complex, right next to the dog park. Everybody walked past it. You could hear people outside at all hours, dogs barking, people talking, footsteps right outside the window. It was one of those places where the outside felt just a little too close. Now I'm an early bird, and Jake is a night owl, so around 10 p.m. I knocked out. Lights off. Jake is still up next to me, scrolling his phone in the dark. This was normal of him. Then out of nowhere, something grabbed my shoulder and yanked me straight out of my sleep. Not gently either, hard. Jake was sitting up next to me, completely still, eyes aimed right at the kitchen doorway, and I could tell just by looking at him that something was wrong. This wasn't him being restless or weird. He was locked in. I go, "Jake, what?" He whispers, "I think there's somebody in the apartment." I asked him what he meant. Did he hear something? He said no. He said, "I was watching a video on my phone, and I saw a man walk right past the bed into the kitchen." To get more context, you gotta visualize the layout of the apartment again for a second. The front door opens and the bed is right there, to the left. Whoever Jake saw came through that door and passed within arm's reach of where we were both laying and walked into that kitchen. That's how small the place was. I'm a big skeptic, so my first thought was maybe he caught a shadow at the corner of his eye or something. I asked him if that was possible. He looked at me like I was stupid and said, "I was wide awake. I saw a man walk past me." Mind you, Jake is one of the most laid-back people I've ever met in my life. The type of guy who doesn't really rattle or scare easily. In all the years I've known him, I'd never seen him wake me up like that. Never seen him look like that. So when he whispered it that flat and that certain, I felt something shift in my chest a little. I reached into the nightstand and grabbed my knife. My heart was going, but I kept thinking this apartment is so small, there was genuinely nowhere to go in here. If someone is actually standing in that kitchen right now, I'm about to find out. I turned on the kitchen light. Nothing. Cabinets closed. Nobody there. Checked the bathroom. Also nothing. Came back and just stood there in the quiet, holding a knife, and the apartment was completely empty. I told Jake I didn't find anyone, and he kinda just shrugged and said he knew what he saw. No panic, not trying to convince me further. Just settled into it like he'd already made his peace with whatever it was. That confidence is honestly what got me more than anything else. So I started looking around a little more carefully, checking for anything off. Anything that could explain how someone gets in and out of a tiny apartment without a trace. I'd seen the movie Vacancy years ago, and that was the part of my brain that was awake at 1 a.m., thinking about hidden entry points and people who use them. There are plenty of horror stories regarding Airbnbs. I didn't think anything obvious, but I'll be real with you. I was exhausted. If something was there, I might have walked right past it. We left the next morning. To this day, I still think about it. Was someone actually in that apartment? Did they slip out through something I missed? Or did Jake genuinely believe he saw something, was so sure of it, but maybe his mind just played a trick on him that night? I go back and forth on it. I don't know. Whatever it was, I didn't find it, and I'm not sure if I wanted to either. Story by Defiant Ad, 3993. A glitch with the paper trail. Many years ago, I used to write very important briefings to a particular government official. Nothing too high-ranking, but the point is that the briefings had to be short, concise, and perfect. So you would spend an inordinate amount of time preparing them compared to just talking to someone, because it was an official decision that was being made, no matter how minuscule. Because of that, and me being somewhat junior at the time, my boss would go back and forth with me on my briefings. He was very adamant about not fixing them for me, but rather reviewing them and pointing out mistakes and making suggestions for improvement. On that particular day, I was pretty happy with the briefing and handed it to him for his white glove review. I forget the actual word, but he'd underscored a typo in red marker, as he always did, and passed the paper back to me. "You misspelled blah." I looked at the word and sure enough it was misspelt. Now here comes the glitch. Whatever that word was, I thought to myself, there is no way I messed up that word. It was a word I knew well how to spell. For a split second there was a kind of blur in my vision as I was staring and focusing at the paper, and then suddenly it was spelt correctly. I passed the paper back to him and said there was no typo, and he looked and agreed. So a very tiny, perhaps insignificant occurrence, but I swear this happened and it involved my boss too, although I never brought up the whole glitch in the matrix angle with him. Story by James Drayton, One Irish Turn. Back in 2018, my family had bought a house outside a rural village in the Irish Midlands. After 4 years of living here, my dad was planning to sell the house and move to the west coast with his partner, whereas I planned to move back to my hometown in Yorkshire, England. In the summer of 2021, roughly towards the end of the pandemic, my dad and his partner had gone away for a few days to Galway on the other side of the country, so it was just me, my sister, and our dog at home. Waking up early one morning, my sister and I heard the sound of gushing water coming from somewhere in the house. After some investigating, we eventually found the source of the water was coming from the boiler, which was behind a wardrobe in my sister's room. For whatever reason, water was flowing out of the boiler at a very rapid pace, and although I tried my best to stop it, there was still no sign that it would. Having no idea if the boiler was broken or even how to fix it, my sister and I quickly began to panic because now the water was moving into the living room and beginning to flood the house. Unable to solve the problem ourselves, we eventually called our dad and told him what happened. Thankfully, his partner knew of a plumber who lived fairly nearby, and so she arranged for him to come and fix our boiler problem by the end of the day. By late evening, and after the house had been flooding for several hours, the plumber eventually came over to fix the boiler. However, when we brought him into my sister's room, after looking confused for a few seconds, the plumber then turned the handle on the side of the boiler anti-clockwise, and just like that, the water stopped running. According to the plumber, someone had turned the handle completely loose on the side of this boiler, and that's why water was gushing out the way it was. Although my sister and I were incredibly relieved the house would no longer flood with water, we were now left just as confused. How could someone have turned the boiler's handle if it was just me and my sister in the house? Obviously, neither of us had done it. So in that case, how the heck could that have happened, when my sister and I know for a fact no one tampered with that handle? Story by Constipated G. That's just how I got downstairs. When I was around 8 or 9 years old, I used to literally fly. I'm 100% sure this wasn't a dream. I remember it way too clearly, and it didn't happen just once. It happened so many times that it felt normal back then. This took place in my grandparents' old house. The house itself was really old, like traditional wooden style, kind of worn down even back then. To get upstairs, you had to go through this dark hallway, and the stairs weren't even proper stairs. It was basically a steep wooden ladder, like something you'd see in old Asian homes. The whole place was always dark. I don't even remember there being proper lights, and my bedroom was upstairs. Every night, I was terrified to go up there. I always felt like something was behind me, like I was literally being chased. That fear felt so real that I'd panic and start running towards the stairs to get downstairs as soon as possible. Whenever I wanted to come back downstairs, I wouldn't climb down the ladder, I would run, genuinely thinking something was chasing me, and then I would just jump, like fully jumping off from the top. But instead of falling, I would slowly float down. Not even fall, more like glide or levitate. I'd land safely every single time, super smoothly. It didn't just feel like floating, it felt like something was holding me, like invisible giant hands were lifting me and gently lowering me down. Not grabbing or hurting, but just supporting me and placing me safely on the ground. I never got injured, not even once. I never questioned it back then. I wouldn't even turn back to look at the ladder. I didn't stop and think, wait, I just flew. It just felt normal, like my brain didn't process how weird it was. This happened over and over again. Not once, not twice. This was just how I got downstairs. I kept this to myself for years because obviously it sounds insane. I thought maybe I was just imagining things or mixing it up with my dreams. It still felt normal. But about a year ago, my sister and I were talking about that house, how creepy and dark it used to be. And out of nowhere, we both brought this up at the same time. We had never talked about this before, and we described the exact same experience. Running, feeling chased, jumping, and then slowly floating down safely. Even the feeling of being held or guided down. We both swore on our life we weren't lying, and it didn't feel like a dream to either of us. I don't know what to make of it. Maybe it was some kind of shared childhood hallucination. adrenaline messing with memory, or something else entirely. Okay, I just found this funny because I never did this exactly, but I do remember jumping off of trees and jumping off of higher rocks when I was a monkey growing up. I was always climbing trees outdoors. And I don't know if I recall floating or gliding down, but I do remember that I would jump from really high up and I would never get injured. Maybe my mind is just blocking out that I was being lowered gently. Very interesting, though, idea. Especially as kids, they're being protected somehow. Again, I don't believe it's some innate ability that breaks physical laws. I think it's the higher level meta layer where developers, guardian angels, whatever you want to call them, I think guardian angel is a good moniker for them, but they're here to protect us because we have a specific path or goal in mind that we chose, I believe. We have to make sure that we stick to universes where we can accomplish that goal. Yeah. Story by Natural Reindeer 546. It's cruel that you'll forget. Before I was born, I remember being in what looked like a bluish-whitish room. It felt almost like a place where you prepared for life before entering it. I remember somehow choosing or editing things about myself, like what I would look like, what kind of family I would have, and what I was supposed to experience or accomplish in this life. The purpose felt like gaining experience or progressing to another level of existence. What's strange is that I also remember there being countless planets or worlds to choose from. The clearest part of the memory is sitting in what looked like a medical chair connected to some kind of a machine. I somehow understood that my consciousness was about to be inserted into a human body. Right before it happened, I had this overwhelming thought. It's cruel that once I'm there, I'll forget this isn't my real form. I remember thinking I needed to hold on to that knowledge, even if I wasn't supposed to. As the machine started working, I kept repeating to myself over and over, remember, this isn't your true form. Remember, you're only there to gain experience. Remember. Then suddenly, the next thing I knew, I was looking up at my mom. Everything was blurry, but I knew it was her. This is the story. The one that I find, it's short, but it's so intriguing. Because I believe this kind of links to simulation theory. You're in the real world. You could incorporate this as a spiritual event, sure. But I think being hooked up to a machine, almost like a medical area, it does imply more of a simulation theory because it's not some angel's lab in heaven. It's more like a different reality that we don't have access to. It's like Matrix style. We're implanted into a fake, simulated universe with other real human beings playing the game. And we get to choose so many parameters. Where we're born. Maybe we choose our parents too. I wonder if we can choose specific parents, or maybe like a general archetype of what our parents are going to be like. But it does make you wonder though, why would anyone choose brutal conditions of growing up in Somalia with ruthless parents, like a warlord parent, or in total poverty with no hope of escape? I guess, sometimes I'll play RimWorld and I'll load up the most hardcore challenge and just go in naked, no resources, 0 skills, and somehow try to survive. Drop myself in the jungle and just die of malaria within 2 days. So I guess maybe people are choosing to play in the hardcore setting, the most challenging setting possible. It almost reminds me of spicy food where I'll make the choice to eat something really spicy and I'll hate it. It's so painful. But then time moves on, pain passes, and I'll subject myself to that pain again because, I don't know, I'm masochistic, I guess. I don't know what it is. Play Dark Souls or any other game where there's a great challenge. And I guess, in principle, it's the same principle. It's just that life, the simulation, is so realistic because we feel so much more than any video game can offer us right now. Right now, it's just a visual and auditory stimuli, but Would you load into RimWorld on the highest difficulty if you could experience the pain and agony of dying of malaria? Or, being super hot or super cold or anything like that? I don't know. But my guess is yes. And the only difference from that then is just one extra level, suppressing a memory. We can't do that yet, but probably we can eventually. The other interesting thing about this is how you mentioned there are different worlds to choose from. It's not just Earth. It's not just human beings. We could probably load in as a different alien species. Maybe one of the aliens that are here observing humans. Actually, you could load into... Your parents could be aliens on a spaceship hovering above Earth. How cool. That is so fascinating. When I load back into the real world, maybe I'll come back as an alien. So, if you're ever abducted by a prankster alien, you know what's going on. Story by Prestigious Young, 212. It started with a jacket. I genuinely don't know what's happening to me anymore, and I'm scared people will think I'm crazy if I talk about this in real life. All these things happened within 1 year, which is why it started terrifying me so much. It started with a very realistic dream where my mom bought my sister a specific jacket. I remember every detail clearly. The weird part is that my mom was not planning to buy her a jacket at all. The next day, she suddenly bought my sister the exact same jacket from my dream. Same style, same details, everything. I was shocked but stayed quiet about it. After that, I had another dream about a zoo in my country that had been closed since 2005, reopening again. I'd never even visited that zoo in real life before. The next day, I suddenly heard news that it was actually being renovated and reopened. And before anyone says, maybe I heard about it subconsciously. No, I had never heard any news about it before the dream. Another dream was about my mom checking my phone and finding a secret I was hiding from her. When I woke up, I had this strong feeling telling me to delete the thing I was hiding. A few hours later, completely out of nowhere, my mom asked to check my phone. The scary part is she never done something like that before. Then, something even stranger happened. I was sitting in a cafe at a mall with my mom when one of our relatives suddenly came to my mind for no reason at all. We are not even very close. I told my mom that I randomly thought about her, and my mom told me she had moved to another city. A few minutes later, after leaving the cafe, we literally ran into her by complete chance. But the experiences that scared me the most involve family members. There's my mom's uncle, someone I had only seen twice in my entire life. For some reason, he suddenly stayed in my thoughts for an entire week. I kept thinking about him nonstop without understanding why. Then suddenly, we heard news that he had died. He wasn't known to be sick, and we barely heard news about him before that. Ever since then, I felt guilty for some reason, even though I know it probably makes no sense. A few months later, something similar happened again. I have a huge family with around 46 uncles and aunts, but for some reason, one specific uncle suddenly stayed on my mind. The next day, we heard he had suffered a stroke. Before that, I had no idea he was sick or going through anything. At this point, I am honestly scared of my own thoughts sometimes. I don't know if these are just insane coincidences, intuition, subconscious pattern recognition, or something else completely. I just needed to tell someone because keeping all of this inside me is driving me crazy. Story by Otakuanik, The Fish Stall in the Rain. This happened around 3 years ago. Back then, I used to go to my physics tuition alone. The tuition was pretty far from my house, so it took me around 30 minutes to go and come back. That day, it had been drizzling since morning. I don't know why, but the whole atmosphere felt strangely creepy from the beginning. Anyway, I left home around 6:30 a.m. for tuition. The class ended around 9 a.m., and when I came outside, it was still raining slightly. So I started walking back home. To be honest, my mood already felt weird that day for no reason. While walking, I kept looking around. Everything felt oddly unfamiliar, even though it was my usual route. Eventually, I entered my locality. It was still raining. Then suddenly, when I looked to my right, I saw a man standing in front of a fish stall with his back turned toward me. He looked exactly like an uncle who lived a few houses away from ours. I thought maybe he was buying fish. I remember thinking to myself, finally, I saw someone familiar. Then I just continued walking and went home. While entering the house, I noticed a small crowd gathered across the road, talking about something. I didn't think much of it. I kept my bag down, washed up, and sat down to relax. A few minutes later, my mother came and said, "Did you know? That uncle died last night." The moment she said that, I literally froze, because barely 5 minutes earlier, I had seen him standing at that fish stall. So if he died the previous night, then who did I see? Even today, I still don't have an explanation. Maybe the person standing there only looked similar to him from behind. But still, it never felt like a random mistake to me. The weirdest part is that at the moment I saw the person, that uncle instantly came to my mind, and then just minutes later, I heard he had died the night before. Feels like a little too much coincidence, doesn't it? I wasn't extremely close to him or anything. We just had normal neighborhood conversations sometimes. But I knew his wife pretty well. Whenever we met on the road, she would always stop and talk to me. To this day, I still can't explain what happened that morning. Maybe it was just my eyes playing tricks on me, or maybe it was something else. Has anything like this ever happened to you guys? Story by Laurel Artist 51. Same smile, 60 years. This is something that has repeated itself throughout my life. It started when I was 18 and has continued until now when I am 74. I won't give all the experiences, but the first two pretty much explain what happens. When I was 18, I was riding a bus home from work after a long evening, and suddenly I felt someone massaging my shoulders. I turned around and saw this old man, who had to be at least in his 70s, smiling at me. I got up and went and sat by the bus driver. I just thought he was a creepy guy on the bus. When I moved, I was at least 30 minutes from my stop. The minute I sat down next to the bus driver, I had to get up because I was actually at my stop. I don't know what happened in that 30 minutes except that I walked 5 steps, and when I looked back, the man was missing. About 8 years later, I was at a car wash and left my car to get changed because it was a self-service car wash. And when I looked back, the same man was standing near my car. He was wearing the same clothes and had exactly the same smile. I got back to my car to drive into the bay and discovered that 20 minutes had passed while I was putting my bills into the change machine, and my radio station changed. So this happens every 8 to 10 years. I have probably seen him a dozen times, and there's always about a 15 to 30 minute period of time that's missing. His clothes aren't dated. In fact, when I saw the Rolling Stones in the 90s, Charlie Watts was wearing the same slacks and sweater. If this isn't a glitch in the Matrix, can someone tell me what it is? He has not aged in the last 60 years. Every experience is just about the same, but in a different location, and often a different town. And I'm always immediately repulsed by him. There's frequent physical touch, him rubbing my back, holding my arm, poking me to get my attention, etc. And I always lose time. Creepy, creepy, creepy. My guess is this is an alien because of the time loss. The time loss is, it's more just perception loss. The time still passed, you just weren't aware of it. And I believe that if something occurs to us where there's too much trauma, or it's just so incomprehensible to our brains will, by defense mechanism, layer on to what happened, the figure, the entity, the alien that was there, something that's more familiar, like an old man, that's just being creepy. You say he would even poke you sometimes, like an instrument probing you, or something like that, and your brain is just creating this artificial memory to protect you from the real horror that happened. I often say that I don't think most aliens here are malicious, and I think that's true, but it doesn't necessarily mean that any individual alien they're all gonna be a hive mind. There could be malicious individual aliens that have access to a ship and technology and could be roaming around probing and abducting in ways that the general species, their government, if they have one, or culture doesn't abide by. I mean, we have plenty of people like that, human beings that go against the grain and do things that are, really horrible. People torture animals today just for fun. Most of us would agree that's wrong, but those individuals still do it. So I think the same principle could apply, that there could be individual aliens that are malicious. Just probably not the whole bulk of the species. Yeah. Now time for the jokes of the day. I told my son it was time for his nap. He refused to lie down, so with a heavy heart, I had to report him to the police. He was resisting arrest. Why don't spies fart in bed? Because it would blow their cover. So juvenile. Customer, I asked for medium rare. This is well done. Chef, thank you. Not what he meant. What do you call a guy with no shins? Toe-knee. Tony. What do you call a paper airplane that doesn't fly? Stationary. Alright, more glitches up here, check them out, and I'll see you guys next time.